everybody, it's a couple days before Christmas. I'm out on one of the ridges here on my property. A little cool, but it's fantastic weather finally. It's probably the first time in, I don't know, about 10 years it hadn't been raining. But I've got a new product today. This is a survival bedroll from Charlie Mike Tactical Solutions. And let me give that guy a look. He's got some good products. He's a fantastic person, and he's a friend of ours. So I'm gonna test this out, jump in it, see what it feels like, see what it's all about. All right. So like I said, this is a kind of a survival bedroll, all-in-one, multi-functional, and this is a little departure from the stuff you've seen me use in the past. Although there were several years of my life where this is what I was doing, this kind of thing here. So what it has is the beloved Wooby on the inside, and it's Velcroed, sewn in and Velcroed to a wool blanket with a zipper, which is also then Velcroed to a tarp with a little survival lining on the inside. So it's kind of like a three-piece sleep system. The tarp can be used for a bivvy like it is. You can take it off and use it for a shelter. Take it off, use it like a poncho, as well as the other components. They're all modular, so you can actually wear the Wooby, or you can wear the wool blanket, or if you have a setup like this in a hammock or just on the ground, like I said, you can get all inside of it and zip it all up and stay warm. The bottom is Velcroed, so the zipper is just in one direction, but that's a good seal there. So yeah, it's a pretty sweet piece of gear. I'm going to get inside this and take a nap, because that seems like the thing to do on a beautiful day right before Christmas. Well, it feels pretty good. And another little surprise you get is this little survival pouch. Is sewn into the wool blanket. It has this little survival packet in it. Everything you need to help you survive. But I'm just going to sit back and relax, and and it's almost Christmas, so people are thinking about Santa Claus and reindeer and the North Pole and elves and all that sort of thing. But that kind of reminds me of my time up near the North Pole. Some good memories. Good memories.
We were much younger then. My lifelong best buddy Andrew Warren and I decided we were going to hunt caribou in Alaska. And he was stationed up there at Elmendorf out of Anchorage at the time. And so we decided to go up to Kotzebue, Alaska with the Zodiac. And this is where the trip went bad, because the one we had rented out was rented out from under us. So Andrew and I had to go find a 30-year-old boat, make a floor for it, get a jet motor instead of prop, and try to get up this river 65 miles. We couldn't get it to plane in. We were plowing water. The forklift from shipping put 2 holes in it. We patched that on the bank before we headed up, and then we made it to this island. And that's about as far as we got, because the next morning the brittle plastic in the front valve, the front ballast, went bad. And Andrew had to sit up front and pump air into the front ballast while I drove us back out and across the sound. So we hobbled back to Kotzebue there and stayed in our little shipping container, the same one we stayed the first night. After arriving, now we're staying our third night, and the next morning we shipped all our stuff back to Anchorage. But while doing so, we got a good contact, and he arranged things for a meeting with a bush pilot who agreed for a fraction of the normal cost that he would fly Andrew and I out into the bush, so we wouldn't completely lose our experience up here hunting caribou. And let me tell you, if you're going to go up there, this is the way to do it. The boat ride was fun in its own right, but if you're going to do it, go ahead and get the plane and do a drop hunt like we did. So we pointed out on the map where we wanted to be. He told us he could get us there. And about 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes in this plane, and we were there. And it really saved the hunt, and that was with Northern Air Trophy, Matt Owen, great guy. A little bit crazy, but that's good. You want your bush pilot to be a little bit crazy. So here we are landing. First time in a tundra plane. That's an experience all into its own, worth the price of admission even if you don't see a caribou. He just plops it down wherever he wants. And now we're caribou hunting. So Andrew and I refer to this as the best worst trip ever, and the theme was ups and downs. Here we are on top of the world, just one day after complete failure with the bad boat with no other options. Now we're surrounded by caribou and loving life. We can't hunt this day, but we're looking at what's around us and we feel pretty good about tomorrow. We enjoyed the sunset, kind of made plans for how we wanted to hunt it based off what the caribou were doing. And then we woke up the next morning and the caribou were still migrating this beautiful stream just to the north of us. And saw an Arctic fox. One funny thing was the MREs we bought. The guy sold us humanitarian aid MREs with no heater packs. So we're joking here, the only good thing in it was this little cookie. We had to put the meals under our armpits to thaw them so we could eat them not frozen. It was miserable. Beautiful country. We called this little mountain Mobu Knoll. Just as a side note, there are 22 degrees of declination in the area. When we used the map to pinpoint our location, it was crazy adding 22 degrees of declination. So here's Andrew. The next morning, the way the caribou came, just something that interested him and not so much me came by. And so we decided Andrew would shoot first. This is a bull raking his horns on a tree. One of the ones he passed up on. And this is the actual bull he takes.
Someone walking behind right now. That's according to the way I say. Taking direction.
Awesome 300-yard shot.
He's injured bad.
Drilled it right in the Boilermaker. These are some of the caribou that we did not shoot that were with the bachelor group from Andrew's bull. A beautiful sight. I almost shot one of these. Decided against it and am glad that I did not. And you'll see why here in a few minutes. Walking up on the caribou that morning in the sunshine is one of my most vivid memories that I have. And it was just such a sense of relief that we were now successful caribou hunters as a team. Versus a couple buds who went up and camped in the tundra and did not kill a caribou. And that was at this point not going to happen, as we had killed a caribou. And I think I was a little more excited about this one than I was for my own, to be honest with you. Because at this point, we weren't going back empty-handed. And we were 4,000 miles from home, top of the world, above the Arctic Circle, and we had just accomplished what we had set out to do. It was a fantastic feeling. So it took a couple hours to skin the caribou. quarter it, take it apart basically, and put it in meat bags, and then hike it back to camp. After which a blizzard came through, and then it cleared off, and here we are with the task at hand of killing my caribou. And we ran about half a mile, 3/4 mile off our camp hill to intercept this band of caribou, but there were no bulls, and there was a small strain of caribous behind it, so we stayed around to get it. And this yellow one here, this yellow rack bull, was enormous. And at this point I had already shot at it once and didn't know what was going on. It was only about a 300-yard shot, which is a chip shot for me, for what I was doing and for how big that animal is. And I didn't know it at the time, but the scope was shooting about a foot low and about 4 inches to the right. And I had a little pattern of bullets in the forearm of the caribou. Every bullet hit it, but it went through the meat and nothing did anything. And you're about to see the second or third shot coming up right here. We did not have Andrew's rifle at the time to use that, so I just had to keep going and wondering why I wasn't hitting it. That shot also went through the meat of the forearm, doing no real damage. But in the binoculars I could see it was wounded and bleeding, and I was going to have to tag that caribou. You can see how enormous he is. I was going to tag that caribou because he probably would not survive winter. And as he went over the knoll and cut back to his left, Andrew and I went on about a 2-mile run to intercept him at the saddle of a big mountain range. And we had just done that. And I just shot it for the 4th time. You see it limping away. His arms broke up pretty bad now. I ended up having to run him down and shooting him with my .44 mag. And I was in shape then, but I was worn out. And we made a lot of effort. Not the best kills, not what you want, but we didn't give up on it. And at the time I could probably run a 4-minute 25-second mile, but I'd never run so hard as Andrew and I ran in that tundra trying to catch that caribou. And we did it, so we did not quit. It's Boone and Crockett's record book. I didn't know that from my elbow at the time. I just knew it was the biggest thing I'd ever seen. But again, went down from the lows to the highest high. And here you see me completely worn out. We'd have to come back for it in the morning because we were a couple miles from camp. And we were losing light. Here's the next day. Everything's cleaned up, skinned out, parted up, and we're waiting to be picked up by our bush plane, which is like jail. You can't go hiking, you can't go anywhere, you just have to sit around camp and wait for a plane. And then a freak windstorm came and destroyed our tent shortly after this video was taken. And Andrew and I kind of went into survival mode, and we lived inside a tarp for the next few days, waiting on the plane to come. This coincided with the 9/11 anniversary, and we weren't sure if they had grounded all flights again, which the year before people got left out there a couple weeks. So Andrew and I were prepared for this eventuality and weren't really worried or really even surprised by it, as sometimes this happens up there. Either weather or some kind of freak, something happens. You can be left out there for a week or two. That's kind of rare, but you need to be prepared for it because you're really not going to extract yourself in any kind of reasonable manner without that plane coming. So we lived in a tarp. This is it. We had to hike a little bit to find a little divot out of the wind, a little defilade from the wind there, and this was the only place we could find it out there on the tundra. And we were just existing until this plane came, which was several days late. And we had no way to communicate to the family back home, so we were actually a little worried that they were worried about us. We did have a handheld radio, and I had a contact in Kotzebue that we had met there named Darvin, and he gave us his family channel. And this evening, when the probability of that plane landing was almost zero. We hiked up to a mountain and made a 38-mile radio shot with some radio wizardry up to the village up there at No Attack, and got his family, who then radioed back to Darwin in Kotzebue, and just wanted to make sure everything was good. And they let us know it was weather and nothing else, and we told them we were fine, didn't need extraction, we were just curious. And so now it's just a waiting game, and anytime you're waiting and miserable, might as well build a fire. It'll always lift your spirits. But on that note, if you ever do decide to build a fire in the tundra, be prepared to spend about 4 hours to get what you saw there. Just rotten, wet, soggy wood.
I told Tron we were flying, so maybe she figured it out, maybe. I don't know. Hope no one's worried. If whoever watched this video later, and you were worried, we were thinking about you.
And that plane finally did come. Even though it was extremely foggy, he somehow was able to get under it just enough to pick us up and get out, and it was basically his only window for 2 or 3 more days. So we just made it just in the nick of time there. Or we'd had a few more days out in the bush. So there again, we went from the lowest of lows, surviving with almost no food left, no tent or shelter, living in a tarp on the tundra, stranded, to being in that airplane and flying back to Kotzebue. And here I am calling my folks, letting everybody know we're good, and to spread the word around. So now it's time for Caribou Hunt Take 2, a few years later. And the backstory on this is goes back to the Royal Rangers, where Andrew's dad played a crucial role in keeping all the boys outdoors with that program. He was one of the commanders, as we called it, would be a troop leader equivalent to a Boy Scout. And he took us on so many adventures as a kid, just once a month, once every 2 months, campouts. Took a lot of his time to make that happen for us boys there. And his lifelong dream was to hunt big game in Alaska. And so, with Andrew's wife and my wife both pregnant, we figured this was the time to do it before we all got bogged down with kids and everybody got too old. So we took Ray out, Andrew's father, for his lifelong dream of big game hunting in Alaska. And another bad weather day, which is very common up there, I was dropped off first with no guarantee that Andrew and Ray could get back out. And so I'm not setting anything up. I'm just going to roll out my bivvy and sleep if I need to. But fortunately, a couple hours later, here comes Ray and Andrew landing to complete the party. And then we were hunting. The next day, you can't hunt the same day you fly, but just getting out there to where the caribou are is the whole deal. And that's the kind of the majesty of this place, where you have to be to find these animals. Same pilot, Matt Owens with Northern Air Trophy. Fantastic pilot. And then Ray and Andrew get out and off to the races. Priority number 1 is to find a caribou for Ray. And this didn't take long. Morning number 3, I woke up, looked out the tent, and there was a bull. Not the biggest ever, but Ray and Andrew looking for some meat and the experience more than just a big rack. So about a 250, 300 yard shot out of the tent, off the coffee table in the vestibule. And that's how you get it sometimes. Other times you're walking your legs off for miles and miles and miles, but you kind of take them where you find them out there. And if you can shoot one from the tent, there's nothing to complain about. It was nice to be there to help Ray complete his dream, especially after he had sacrificed so much of his time when we were so young. It always feels good to be able to to repay the favor. So congratulations, Ray. It was a great shot and a fine-looking caribou. Then Andrew and I and Ray set about the task of finding a couple more. But this year the migration was not as strong due to weather, and we had a little bit more difficulty getting lined up on some bulls. And we just weren't seeing the numbers of caribou. And we had probably hiked 35, 40 miles in the first 3-4 days we stayed there. In fact, we wore Andrew's dad out a little bit. He started hanging back at the camp just to enjoy the experience. And here you see him attending to camp chores and writing in his journal. He would cook us meals as we'd come in from the hunt. But as it does, the migration pattern changed and we just weren't seeing animals. And we made the call to Matt, and they picked us up and brought us to a new camp that was a fully outfitted camp that someone else wanted to get out of the bush from. And so we had all this food and all this outfitted camp set up, and basically no one to sit in it. So he just moved us over and said, please eat the food and make yourself at home. And we were more than happy to do that. So we went from eating MREs to eating sirloin, T-bones, ribs, fries, bacon, eggs, everything you could ever imagine. And we just kind of walked into that situation with no complaints. But as usual, we had a freak windstorm, which usually brings 55, 60 mile an hour straight line winds for about 12 to 15 hours, which you are seeing here. Andrew had just killed his caribou in that weather, and we had one more day to get mine the next day. The next day was my day, but the camera I was using at the time would not do well in the weather. So this is the last day out there. Good weather, good skies. We expect a plane to be coming. And again, Ray was cooking up breakfast. This was the biggest bull we saw the whole trip, and I shot it with about 20 minutes left on the last night of the hunt. You don't really want to be shooting anything the day the plane comes, because you gotta pretty much be ready at a moment's notice to pack that thing up and leave. So it all worked out, and it was a fantastic time with good friends.
The biggest ones we saw. Quick 6 days. Just flew by. I hear a plane. We've been hearing planes all morning. One of them, I guess, is going to be ours.
There's Pete patching up the last of our butterfingers. Dad's sipping the tundra mocha.
So on a beautiful morning, the plane comes in to pick us up and take us home. We've had another good time, and Ray Warren's dream has come true that he's had since he was a little boy. It's nice to be a part of it, but this is a special tribute to men like Ray Warren who go way out of their way. Take little boys out in the woods and teach them how to be a man, give them those experiences that'll carry with them through their whole life. And it was also nice to be a part of Ray and Andrew's hunt together, father and son. So thanks, Ray, and glad to be a part of it, and thanks for all you did helping us grow up. And for all the other guys out there, get those kids in the woods. You never know where it might lead.